Students, I am Vasantha Parmar here and I welcome each one of you to my class 11th English lessons. Today I would like to take the first chapter from the book Hornbill, that is the portrait of a lady, written by Kushwant Singh. The portrait means the picture, right? But here the portrait means pen portrait. Pen portrait means writing about, right, characteristics and describing about the personality. So here Kushwant Singh has beautifully described about his grandmother, his relationship with his grandmother, right? How he spent, okay, his childhood as well as adulthood and schooling. Okay, so let's begin. Let's see about the author first. Kushwant Singh, born on 2nd Feb 1915 and died on 20th March 2014. He was an Indian author, lawyer, diplomat, journalist, and politician. His experience in the 1947 partition of India inspired him to write Train to Pakistan in 1956, which became his most well known novel. He has won the Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan, and Punjab Ratan Award. So these are the awards he was awarded. Okay. Before we begin the text, I would like to give you the meaning of these phrases. Okay, you will find these phrases in your textbook as well. So I ask you children, please note down this meaning in the book, or you can say in the copy, okay, wherever you feel comfortable. Okay. The thought was almost revolting. Means for Kushwant Singh is like it was very disgusting to think so. Okay. An expanse of pure white serenity. Fine. Means serene, like a snow-covered landscape. Okay. Calm. Okay. Expanse of pure white serenity. Picture of peace and calmness, we can say. Turning point, that is a point of change. Fine. Accepted her seclusion with resignation. Right. So here submitted one's loneliness. Right. So accepted loneliness, accepted her loneliness. Okay. A veritable bedlam of chirrupings. Veritable means various. Bedlam, chaos, confusion. Chirrupings means birds' noise. Okay. So we can say great noise and confusion created by the chirrupings and fluttering of birds. Frivolous rebukes. Frivolous means joyfully, playfully, we can say light. Rebuke means scolding. So light scoldings, light rebukes. The sagging skins of the dilapidated drum. Sagging means loose, dilapidated means old, we can say, or worse. Okay, not in good condition. So sagging skins of the dilapidated drum means loose skin of an old drum. Now here the lesson begins. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. So Kushwant Singh had known his grandmother for the last 20 years. How? As old, right? Old as well as wrinkled for the 20. So all over her faces, there were wrinkles. People said that she had once been young and pretty and had even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. Kushwant Singh says here that it was very difficult for him to believe that once she had been young and pretty and even she had a husband. Why? Because he had seen his grandmother for the 20 years in the same old lady, as an old lady with wrinkles all over her face. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. Right, first he started with the grandmother and he says that grandfather's picture was also hung on the mantelpiece. That is, mantelpiece is the shelf, not above the place, above the fireplace. He wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. That was the appearance in the portrait he is describing here. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest and he looked at least 100 years old. So from the portrait, Kushwant Singh says that grandfather seems to be 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. Fine. So grandfather seems having lots and lots of grandchildren. So that many old he was. As for my grandmother, being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. See, this is a like same. So the author, what author has used here, very pretty strong language. Why? To show a child's dislike for imagining his grandmother to be any different from how he had always known her. How he had known her as very, very old. He did not at all like the idea that his grandmother was young and pretty at one time like other women. See, this was very, very difficult for him to believe. Fine. The thought was almost revolting. So this is what unbelievable for him and it was very difficult for him to believe. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. So grandmother often used to share with his grandson the games what they had played in their childhood. But here Kushwan Singh says that it was like very foolish, like on her, it doesn't seem like dignified, on grandmother's part, okay, because he had known grandmother only as a old lady, right? So for him it is very difficult to believe, as well as he says that whatever the story she says about that prophets used to tell us. So they treated it, whatever she shared with them, like the fables. Fable means stories of the prophets. Prophets means priest, okay. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. This is physical appearance of Kushwan Singh's grandmother. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. Crisscross means lines crossing each other. All over her face, there were wrinkles. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. Again, he's emphasizing on this point, right? Because he had known his grandmother for the last 20 years, right? In the same old, uh, as an old lady. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. So for 20 years, there was no change. There was no change in her grandmother. That was, they say, at the same old age. Okay, same pattern, same wrinkles all over her face. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. Very, very important sentence. Kindly note this sentence. It many times it comes in the paper to explain. She could never have been pretty. Pretty here means outer appearance. We can say physical beauty. Fine. But she was always beautiful. So once grandmother had been young and pretty, that was very difficult for Kushwan Singh to believe. Right? But he says, yes, she was always beautiful. Here, beautiful means in character, in behavior, in dealing with others. Fine. We can say inner beauty. So she was always beautiful. That Kushwan Singh agrees. She hobbled about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. She used to walk in the house? Hobbled. Hobbled means like lame person walks, no? With much difficulty she used to walk, keeping resting one hand on her waist and to balance her stoop. Like she is the old and she has to balance. And on the other hand, she used to have beads of rosary. Rosary means mala, right? With the every bead, each bead she used to recite prayer. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face. Again, puckered means wrinkled face, right? And her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. So, how she was very calm personality, serene, calm. Okay, she always used to spend her time in prayers. And which type of prayer? Inaudible. Whenever she used to pray, no one can hear what she prays. Very calmly and peacefully she used to pray, right? Telling prayers on each bead of the rosary. And this is again physical appearance. Her silver locks were scattered. Locks means the hairs coming over the face, right? Over her pale puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. So here Kushwan Singh talks about divine beauty of his grandmother. That is graceful, divine, calm, serene personality, contented personality, we can say. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. Please make this sentence very important. What Kushwan Singh would like to say with the very beautiful, we can say An unbroken stretch of snow covered mountainside. How the snow covered mountainside looks like a picture of peace and calmness. Here, the grandmother's personality is compared here, right, with the snow covered mountainside. So we can say grandmother's personality is calm and serene like a snow covered landscape. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city and we were constantly together. So, childhood, Khushwant Singh spent with his grandmother in the village. Okay, because that time his parents were in the city. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. This was Khushwant Singh's grandmother used to do for grandson. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song while she bathed and dressed me in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice but never bothered to learn it. Khushwant Singh's grandmother, when she used to dress him up for the school in the morning, she used to recite a monotonous sing song prayer. What was her intention behind reciting this prayer? She wanted Khushwant Singh to learn it by heart. Whereas Khushwant Singh says that I never bothered to learn it, right? I never bothered to learn it. I used to listen because I liked her voice. Okay, so this is the difference. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen, tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. That was the, we can say, the things Kushwant Singh used to carry when he goes to school in the village. After a breakfast of a thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. What they used to have in the breakfast? Previous day's chapati, applying some butter and sugar on it. She carried, here we refers to Khushwant Singh and his grandmother. She used to accompany him, right, when he goes to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for the village dogs. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple and she is a very prayerful lady, right? So she likes to accompany Khushwant Singh to the village as the school is outside the temple. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in rows on either side of the veranda, singing the alphabet or the prayer in a chorus. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When Khushwant Singh along with other children learn outside the temple, right, the alphabets as well as the morning prayers, that time Khushwant Singh's grandmother used to sit inside the temple and she used to spend her time in reading scriptures. Scriptures means holy books. When we had both finished, we would walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. So remaining leftover chapatis, she used to feed the street dogs, right, while going back home. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us. That was a turning point in our friendship. So till here we have seen Khushwant Singh, how he spent his childhood with his grandmother in the village. Very happy. The close relationship was there. They were like friends, okay, and all the time they were together, right, day and night. Now, comfortably their parents settled in the city, so now they sent for them to in city. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. Now Khushwant Singh used to go by bus, by motor bus we can say. So Khushwant Singh's grandmother used to stay at home. She could not accompany Khushwant Singh to school. There were no dogs in the streets and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. So there what she used to do? She used to feed sparrows in the courtyard. Right? There were no dogs, so she used to spend her time in prayer. We can say in inaudible prayer. She used to always say prayer in her beads of rosary, inaudible prayer, and she used to spend the remaining time with the sparrows, feeding sparrows. As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. Why less of each other? Because now there is a change in the friendship. Because in the village they used to stay together, right, from morning till night. But here what happens? Khushwant Singh used to go to school. After coming from the school, he has to do his work, right? So grandmother, like they used to spend little time. Though they shared one common room, but they saw less of each other. For some time, she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. So, whenever Kushwan Singh comes from school, she was very curious enough to know what he is being taught in the school. Because in the village, she knows, okay, the only alphabet and morning prayers were taught, and she could assist Kushwan Singh in learning as well and teaching as well. But here, it may not be possible, right? Because Kushwan Singh goes to the city school. So today I am teaching you till here, and based on the text, right? You will read in the textbook as well. Listen this video 1 or 2 times. So you will. It's a very not very difficult chapter, very easy to understand. Though there are few phrases, fine, of course. So based on this, I have given 4 questions for you to write in the fair copy. So I ask strictly, children, please make fair copy from the beginning, okay, and frame answers on your own in the standard language. Let's see. Give a description of Kushwan Singh's grandmother according to his earliest memory of her. How Kushwan Singh had known her grandmother for the 20 years. We have seen so many things. So you just write down frame in a proper way, and everything you just merge and write it. Kushwan Singh said about his grandmother, she could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. As I told you, no, pretty. That is outer appearance, we can say, physical beauty, right? That for Kushwan Singh, it is very difficult to believe. Whereas what he is ready to believe, she was always beautiful. Here, beautiful refers to divine beauty, right? Beautiful in character, beautiful in behavior, beautiful in dealing with others, taking care of grandson. Okay, we can say divine because she was very calm personality, right? Serene personality, and she used to spend most of her time in prayer. Why was it hard for the author to believe that his grandmother was once young and pretty? Because Kushwan Singh, for the last 20 years, he had known his grandmother as old lady having wrinkles all over her face. Crisscross of wrinkles means that lines, no, lines crossing each other. Okay. What was Kushwan Singh's and his grandmother's routine in the village? No, how morning she used to dress him up for the school. While dressing up, she used to recite prayers. Right? Her intention was Kushwan Singh should learn this prayer by heart, whereas Kushwan Singh did not bother to learn. Fine, all these things, and then she used to keep the earthen ink pot, slate, plastered with yellow chalk, right? Everything. She used to accompany Kushwan Singh in the school, right? While coming, they used to come together, they used to feed street dogs, so all these things. You have to pick up the main points and you have to write it. So, till here, it's okay, children, for the first video. Second part, I will upload after 2 days. So, meanwhile, you just go through it, prepare yourself well from the beginning, right? So that whenever the exam approaches, you will not face problem. So all the best. God bless each one of you children. Bye.